All right, guys, I'm getting right to it. Fuel gauge connection to Holley 3.5 inch handheld screen. Let's do this. All right, guys, I can't even tell you how many times I've been asked, how do I attach my fuel level sender to the 3.5 inch handheld dash that comes with my Terminator X so that I can have a fuel gauge and not have to actually put gauges in my car? I can just use the handheld and get away with, saving some money. The answer that I've given for the past probably 5 years or something is, well, you can't. Sorry. And technically speaking, you can't hook your sender directly to your 3.5 inch handheld. What we're going to do today is create something called a voltage divider. The problem that you run into with a Terminator X input is it has to be a 5 volt or a frequency input. You can't give it resistance. Those type of sensors use 2 wires, and it takes a special conditioning circuit inside the ECU to be able to read those. Now, in our case, we need to convert a resistance-based signal into a 5 volt signal. And to be honest with you, if I was going to make a true 5 volt signal out of this resistance, I really would need a transistor. For me, that's a little more complicated than just something I can whip up in my garage. I'm not exactly an electrical guy. I somehow end up being the wiring guy. But basically, I want this to be something that you can do, something that I can do easily, something that you can do easily. And the correct way to do it isn't exactly the way we have to do it. The condition that we're going to have to deal with is we're not actually going to use all 5 volts. In our case, it's going to be somewhere around 1.5 to 2 volts that we create with this voltage divider that is a scalable range in order for you to have 0 to 100% fuel capacity. Let's talk about voltage dividers and exactly how they work. What we're going to end up doing here is looking at the voltage that's created between 2 different resistors, and one of those resistors is going to be our fuel gauge or our fuel sender that's in the tank. The nice part about this is it allows us to take the existing wiring that's already in the car that's inside of your fuel tank that runs up to your dash, more than likely, and just use that wire. You don't actually have to drop the tank. You don't have to do anything. Here's the way that it works. I've got a schematic here pulled up. Your voltage in goes into the first resistor, and then we're going to read the signal. V out is going to be our signal voltage that is read between 2 resistors on the way to ground. What you're effectively doing is creating a second path to ground through the ECU, through the signal wire, and you're going to take that reduced voltage, give it 2 paths to ground, and based on what the resistance of R2 is, that's what you're going to get the opposite of that going out of V out. That's your signal. So let's talk about a GM 0 to 90 ohm sensor. This is what I have in my car. This is what I have configured in the software that we're getting ready to look at. And in this case, I'm going to take 5 volts in, use a 220 ohm resistor, drop that down to 1.5-ish volts. Looks like it comes out to 1.45 volts if you do the math on 90, and you do the math on 0, you're obviously going to get 0. You can't divide by 0. So in my case, 100% is going to be 1.45, and 0 is going to be 0. If we move to the next case, like a GM 33 to 240, this is what you're going to find in like an F-body Camaro or something. In this case, you're going to have 1.69 volts and 0.33 volts if you use a 470 ohm resistor. If you go to the Ford 15 to 160 that is common, you'll notice that 330 is about double of 160. Again, this is all, I did the math for common resistors that you'll be able to get. My pack of resistors is something I bought off of Amazon to just stick in my wiring box so that I just have a pack of resistors when I do this stuff. I will admit I cheated just a little bit, and I picked the 470 ohm to use with the GM sender purely because that is the same resistor that you would typically use for a alternator wiring. All right, guys, so let's dive into the software here, how I have it configured. If you look at this icon right here, we've got the IO, ICF. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go to inputs, and fuel level is a 5-volt type, and I have it enabled. I'm going to click configure so you can see what I have here. This is a really simple custom 5-volt is the type. Very basic. It's just percent units, and we're going to, in my case, set this from 0 to 1.5. Whatever your peak voltage is going to be at 100% based on your previous calculation, that's going to be the top value. Whatever your bottom value is, that's going to be your lowest, and you're just going to fill row values. The way that we do that is highlight this bottom row, click the F key, or right click, fill row values. In my case, 1.5 is the top, 0 is the bottom. What you don't want to do is let it auto-populate like I just let it do without actually scaling it, because that's going to be a non-linear shape. You want to actually do a real fill row values on that. Just like that, we're going to do a fill row value. Now we've got even spacing on that bottom axis. So you can make this 0 to 100, you can make it 5 to 100, you can make it 10 to 100. You can go in and see after you do this entire circuit what your peak voltage is and what your minimum voltage is by filling the car up and then running it out of gas, and calibrate this to exactly what percentage you want to display at any given point throughout that. This is where it becomes slightly more complicated to get this onto the handheld, because in order to put this on the handheld, we actually need to display a advanced table on the handheld. There's nowhere to put in and display an input on your handheld. You have to only come up with some way around it. This is the part that I'm not the fondest of, but if you're in a situation where you don't want to put another gauge in, like me, this will work. So the way I created an advanced table in order to give the ECU something to read is I went to 1D tables, named it fuel level again, even though unfortunately you can't use the name in the handheld. And then I needed to pick something for table type that didn't matter. I just needed something that would not affect my tune in any way, shape, or form. And for me, I have a drive-by cable throttle body, so virtual TPS offset was a really good choice. You could use quite a few different things. If you don't have nitrous stage 1 offset, there's something in here I would about guarantee for everybody that you can use that is not going to affect the tune in any way, shape, or form. It's something you don't have, in which case I picked virtual TPS offset. I set the x-axis to fuel level, which is my IO input, and then came down here and literally did the same thing. So 0 to 100% is just 0 to 100% on this scale. All I wanted to do is create a situation where I had a percentage to display. That's all we're doing here. So now we're going to go over to the car. I'll show you a little bit of how I have it wired, and then I'll show you how the dash actually functions. Just want to point out, we're going to come off of the power tap 5-volt circuit with a, in my case, 220 ohm resistor. In your case, it'd be the R1 resistor. That is going to go to an input and then also be split off after that resistor to your fuel level sender. That's what's going to give you this circuit. It's actually extremely simple. All right, guys, I actually left this wire unloomed so I could show it to you. Here's what I did. Came off the power tap, which is part of my Holley harness right here. Orange wire is your 5-volt wire. Found a random 5-volt. It's got a green stripe on it. I didn't care about that, but I'll loom all this up later. But what I did was right down inside of here, very hard to see down in the bottom, there is actually a resistor in line, which is what is underneath this heat shrink right here behind my finger. And then that goes into this input wire. Those two wires together that are joined together go off to the sender. That sender wire comes up, is actually behind the dash. If we go in here, I've got the dash put back together, but that wire all joins together, ultimately creating a situation where I can put my fuel level into the ECU and then display it on the handheld. Okay, so now that we got it wired and we've got it configured and everything on the laptop, and we've built our advanced table in the laptop, let me show you what this looks like, final product on your Holley dash. This is a 5-inch dash, and you guys get a little sneak preview if you're watching this video. I'm going to do a review, so to speak, on the 5-inch dash, but it works exactly like a 3.5 handheld. It just looks a little bit different. So what I want to show you here is if we hold down and select edit, we're going to edit the gauges. You go in here, the channel that we're going to pick. This is the same for 3.5, it just looks a little different. You're going to configure, and we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and find that advanced table 1. You can use any of the advanced tables, but I just had one, was the first one I came to that was unused. So advanced table 1D number 1. You don't get the name. That's the downside. It's not going to say fuel level on it, but I think that's the concession I'm willing to make at this point, to not have to actually put a standalone fuel gauge in. So if you look right here, advanced table 1D, that is what it's going to look like. And if I scroll out here, I've got this thing completely rigged up into a 3-handed situation so I can show you at work. So I'm going to raise and lower my fuel level float, and you can see that that is changing on the dash. And I have it set, if you notice, whenever I was configuring this thing, I have it set to a slow rate right here. And the reason for that is because I don't want it sloshing around and making my fuel gauge bounce. I have a feeling it's going to do enough of that already. But you can set this, to whatever you want. We'll set it to fast just so I'll show you how this thing is quick. So you can see how fast that scale is moving whenever I am swinging the float. But I don't really want that, right? Because I don't want to go down the road and I hit a bump and this thing's just bouncing all over the place. I'm going to set that back to slow, and we'll see what that looks like. Do that slow. All right, so I got a half a tank of gas, and I'm bouncing down the road. It's gonna work great. It's gonna work awesome. Guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope it was really helpful to you. I hate to be the guy that's always telling you like and subscribe and hit the bell and all that stuff, but I gotta tell you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I have noticed here lately that a lot of my subscribers are not actually watching the videos, and I would hope that it's just because they're not being notified of it. If you get a chance, hit that bell so that you actually know when I post something. And I'm going to keep trying to do these tech videos along with putting in all the stuff that we're working on and all the racing program, and it's going to be a little bit of everything, but hopefully that means that there's something here for everybody. All right, thanks a bunch, and I'll see you next time.